Welcome back to episode 2 of my Red Sea diving series. In this episode you'll see 2 more incredible coral reef dives as well as the stunning shipwreck dive on the Million Hope. If you missed episode 1, I'll leave a link in the description below as well as at the top of the screen, so feel free to check that out and enjoy the video. Once again we were back on Camel Dive Club's boat, the Alarm and Soar. It was early in the morning and we had a short trip over to our first dive destination, Jackson Reef. Jackson Reef was centred around an island and had lots of different options to dive. You could stick at around 15 metres if you wanted to, and if you were qualified you could go all the way down to 35, where there was still coral to be seen. You may remember in the last episode those small little fish, antheas. Well, they were back on this dive, and this time they weren't afraid to get up close to the camera, allowing us to get some really detailed shots of those blue eyes and orange bodies. This is a cornet fish. It was nearly a metre long and it's just one of those fish that you have to see to believe. It's so obscure and so different to anything I'd ever seen before. There were some giant fan corals on this dive. We managed to film this parrotfish having a feast on some of the coral. I think this is an absolutely huge shoal of Red Sea bannerfish swimming their way past. There was so much life and so much colour in these corals. It was really cool to see a thriving reef. For dozens and dozens of metres, all you could see was reef and fish. This is an emperor angelfish, and it is by far one of the most colourful fish in the Red Sea. Look at how many different shades of blue are along the face and the bottom of the body, and then the stripes of yellow amongst the white at the top. It's just a really beautiful fish. This was another example of a fish who didn't mind divers being in the water and near it. It was really calm. This shot here gives you a really clear look at the side of the fish, and you can see those blue and yellow stripes in really great detail. I was surprised because we didn't see too many butterfly fish on the trip, but it was great to see this pair. We caught another species of parrotfish having a munch on some of the coral. This clip really highlights how many different species are on this dive. Just looking around, there's easily a dozen different fish. This is a giant shoal of Red Sea fusiliers. It was absolutely massive and they were likely being chased by some sort of tuna. Just look at the sheer size of this huge yellow coral. Even though we did go slightly deep on this dive, we didn't really need to. We spent the rest of the dive nearer the surface, swimming along the coral wall. This was one of only a few lionfish we spotted on the actual reefs themselves. There were a few on the wrecks, but not many on the reefs. The first moray eel of this episode now, and this was a monster. It was number 5 overall on the trip. Our dive leader took the camera and managed to get this incredible footage. Look how close he got to this moray eel. You can see the teeth, you can see the eyes. One absolute monster fish. And that's it from Jackson Reef. We had a short little interval and it was then time to go on to our second dive of the day, which was a shipwreck dive on the Million Hope wreck. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a good map of the Million Hope wreck, but before we jump in, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the shipwreck. The Million Hope was a cargo ship that sank on June 20th, 1996. There were no casualties, all the crew were rescued, and they even managed to salvage the cargo that was on the ship. They brought in a crane to try to salvage the ship. Unfortunately, there was an accident and the crane sank too, and this is where we start the dive. We jumped in and instantly went down to around about 20 metres, which was nearer the bottom of the crane. The visibility wasn't fantastic on this dive, but you can still kind of catch a glimpse at how big things were. This crane was absolutely huge. This wreck is only just over 25 years old, and in shipwreck terms, it's a baby. This means that the ship's still really intact. The corrosiveness of the seawater hasn't really got to it yet, and you can still see the structure and the body of the ship really well. As well as this crane, it's pretty much still perfectly intact. There were lots and lots of lionfish nearer the bottom of the crane. Around about 5 or 6 were surrounding me at any one point. The only reason I could think is that the wrecks would attract smaller fish with lots of places to hide, and this will make it an easy and wealthy hunting ground for lionfish. There were that many that I didn't even notice that one that I've just panned across. The Million Hope wreck was covered in nudibranchs. Because of how dark the wreck was, they were a lot easier to spot as well, whereas you wouldn't usually see them amongst the corals. Nudibranchs are sea slugs, and they can come in all shapes, colours and sizes. There are currently over 3,000 species of nudibranchs found, and science doesn't really know how many there actually are. As you can probably tell, this crane was absolutely massive. There were parts of it you probably could have easily swam through if you tried. This is the back of the ship where the rudder would have been. This is a different species of nudibranch. Like I said, they come in all colours, shapes and sizes. This one was completely different to the last two. As we went up the side of the wreck, there were plenty of tube worms that would retreat as we swam past. This is some species of sea snail. We didn't actually see too many shelled things, we didn't see any crabs or lobsters the whole time we were there. It amazes me how quickly these shipwrecks can become ecosystems. The Million Hope wreck was covered in corals and plants. This will then attract fish, which will then attract predators, so it's just a whole little society under the sea. This would have been the main deck of the ship, right at the very top, and you can see it's already beginning to get covered in plants and coral. I wonder how many years it would take for the ship to become entirely covered in coral and plants. I bet before long you wouldn't even notice that it's a shipwreck. You will notice that this wreck is yet to be invaded by those little small anthea fish. I'm sure they'll come in time, but they haven't reached the Million Hope just yet. Some parts of the wreck were even beginning to grow these giant table corals off the side of it. I think mainly due to the visibility, we didn't see too much in terms of fish and sort of the bigger animals on this dive. It was more of a chance to just have a dive on one of the more modern wrecks and appreciate it whilst it's still pretty much completely intact. The camera didn't focus too great on it, but I think this is another species of nudibranch. This time it was white and quite a bit longer than the other ones we saw. Even with the slight current and reduced visibility, this sweeping shot gives you a little bit of a view of how big this wreck was. It was absolutely giant. We saw this species of nudibranch about 5 or 6 times during this dive, so I'm guessing it's one of the more common species. If there's any experts watching that know what species this is, let me know in the comments because I'll be really interested to find out. Right at the end of the dive we spotted yet another parrotfish eating the coral. But that was it from the Million Hope wreck. That was probably one of my favourite dives on the whole trip. I really enjoyed it. It was another short interval, and on our way back to shore we reached our third and final dive of the day, which was Far Garden. If you watched the last episode, you may remember we dived Middle Garden, and this is Far Garden, which is just north of it. It's a fairly shallow dive, there's no real need to go below 20 metres, and it focuses on those huge table and fan corals. We started off the dive with this very cute masked pufferfish. I think because maybe this was a slightly shallower dive, a lot of the coral was bleached again and most of it was unfortunately all white. This seems to be a parrotfish filled episode. I do find it really cool watching them feed on the coral. I do also get a slight bit of amusement out of looking at them. They're really goofy fish. If you look really closely at this clip, there is a fish, but it's very well camouflaged. This is a crocodile fish. It's that well camouflaged that even when it was pointed out to me, I still couldn't see it. We finished off this dive by getting a closer look at a blue spotted stingray. The one in the last episode swam right past us so we couldn't really see it, but this one was staying still underneath a rock, just chilling out. You can really see the blue spots on it. And that signalled the end of that dive at Far Garden as well as this day's diving. It was a really enjoyable day and probably overall my favourite day of the whole trip. Thanks for watching this episode of my Red Sea diving trip. If you enjoyed the video, give us a like. Subscribe to Naturescope to not miss any more videos. From the Red Sea trip, I've got one more diving video coming as well as a bonus snorkeling video, so you don't want to miss that. Turn that bell notification on. And all that's left for me to say is thanks again for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. See you next time.